topic is, is this your phone?
Is it, oh boy, sorry.
I'm just gonna put it down here.
That's fine.
So the topic, gentle giantness, is an interesting topic because it really addresses, in my opinion, the allness and the isness that we know as God. And there's so many names that we have of God, for God. So as y'all know, I have a story, and so this time is no different. Some of you have heard this story. My children love this story, but since we have new folks in the sanctuary, I'm going to share it. So there was a guru, and the guru had been meditating up on the mountain for years, and meditating, praying, just with himself. And so the town below, the village below, they were expecting him to come down. So they threw a huge party, and so he came down the mountain, and they said, Mr. Guru, what is your secret? And he says, I have learned to control my anger. So the party went on, folks were celebrating, they were cheering him on, they were just loving his vibe. So one of the reporters came to him again and said, Mr. Guru, please tell me, what is your secret? He says, I have learned to control my anger. So some more time went on. They were partying all night, right? Just having a great time, celebrating, wanting to know what are his answers to life, and what are his secrets, and what did he learn. So the reporter came back to him again and said, Mr. Guru, what is your secret? I have learned to control my anger. And so he stomped back up the mountain, never to be seen again for another 5 years. Right, so why is that story important? I think it really is interesting how sometimes we love to, in our stillness, talk about how great we feel, right? I feel great. But God didn't put us here by ourselves. No man is a mountain, no man is an island. We are all here to kind of bump up against each other, live up against each other. Some of us do a little bit more than others. We see children in the sanctuary, so we know how that happened, right? So that being said, that was some adult humor, y'all. Janasia got it. So that being the case, I think it's interesting that we are really clear about how are we when we touch other people, when we are in each other's presence. Personally, I love solitude. I have my moments. I have a man cave. My wife loves to tell you, she loves to talk about her sewing room. But every so often, we'll kind of check in. You all right? You still here? We still married? We good? That's kind of our thing. You want something to eat? Let's go get you some coffee. Everybody's safe. Y'all know about her with the coffee, right?
Yeah.
So here's a statement. I use a lot of humor. I just want you guys to know I use a lot of humor. People are lovely when they're kind, loving, and what you want them to be. And they're also fickle, opinionated, and judgmental. So that's an interesting statement because really, like I said, we are all from a different set of parents. None of us. Even, it's interesting because my mom told me this way. Her mom told her this, that way. But somehow we make it fit, right? It's interesting through my years of dating, this was a long, long, long time ago. Long time. You get to hear these stories about how people grew up. Like, y'all did that? Wow, that's interesting. And you hear about how some similarities show up. So those are things we get along with. But I'm also inviting you to feel that other folks have different ways that they grow up. That has nothing to do with you. It's everything to do, right? And so the next statement says, they can't help themselves. That's when everything gets screwed up, right? We want to blame others for things going wrong, when in fact it's our judgments of others that get in the way. As you apply gentleness to your interactions with others, you can allow them to be their gentle selves. And from that place, you can both make a clear decision for your own lives. The best, you're going to make me use the microphone.
No, you can just talk over me.
Okay. What's interesting is that forgiveness, I read somewhere that the perfect relationship is between two forgivers. And I'm not going to sit up here and say that in our 12 years, and some of you have been married much longer. I know Mom, you guys been married 20, how many?
20.
Wow, and I was at that wedding. It was really nice. All right, congratulations. So my reason for saying that is that the perfect marriage between two forgivers is really an opportunity for you to see them in their humanness. I'm not perfect. My wife will gladly tell you that I'm not, right? I ain't make the bed up this morning, right? Most of the time I do pretty good, right?
You're perfect.
Well, I ain't gonna say that. Perfectly imperfect, right? But I love to share about myself in that because it's really important for us to see that we really are connected. I'm not selling a pipe dream here. We really are on this journey together. And I don't make light of that. I'm really figuring this thing out, right? Just like you guys, I just happen to be up here now. There'll be days when Easter's up here, and he'll say that he's figuring this thing out. I have a past. Chuck would gladly love to tell you, right? He would love he would love to tell you. I mean, I wasn't robbing banks, but he would love to tell you.
There was that one time.
So I want to say this and to counter it, when we realize that, we understand that we are one. Our energy is in one energy in a myriad of forms. Let me say that again. We are one. We're all connected. You'd be surprised when folks say stuff and then another person jumps in, another person jumps in. We did the testimonial service for Easter. It was interesting how we realized, like, wow, he's going through that, I'm going through that too. She's going through that, I'm going through that too. You'd be surprised. I mean, sometimes we like to think, oh, I'm the only one going through this. You're wrong, right? It's best that you see their humanness so you can feel your own humanness. Chuck talked about men sharing of themselves, right? The reason why we don't share as much is because we do buy into, and with our egos, that we have to be strong all the time. I think recently my wife experienced that because I was upset about some tax stuff. And I'm sure you guys can relate to that, right? If you've ever owed money for taxes. We are one energy in a myriad of forms, individualized expressions of the divine. And divine is God, whomever you call God, right? Each and every one of us is sacred and holy. Let's say that. Each and every one of us is sacred and holy. We get caught up in this whole thing about how we used to live, how we used to be. We're not living that no more. Most of us have just surpassed it. I think sometimes the things we used to do that we don't do no more, that maybe we feel guilt, blame, or shame, we are in ourselves our own judgment. We judge ourselves. We continue to judge ourselves. And that is what happens when we meet other people. We say, oh man, she doing that again. He said that he doing that again. Right? And then there's no, well, you did this, but I did that. I worked at the House of Ruth, as shared by Jane, with the batterers. And it was interesting because some of them had substance abuse challenges, and I'm going to say challenges. And they would judge each other so much in some of the things they've done to their wives, girlfriends. It's like, well, you did that. Well, I did that. You all are here, like in the same room, right? You're in the same room for hurting someone who you said you love, right? So we're not here to say, oh, well, my sin, and sin means in Greek, missing the mark. What I did was worse, or what you did was worse, or what he did was worse. We're not going to do that. We're going to say that we're all trying to figure this thing out, right? The other person, place, or thing is none other than the expression of love itself. No matter what, if your parents are here today, if they're together today, most of us are here based on some emotion that your two parents expressed for one another in that moment of conception. Now, I'm not saying that they ain't walking around like Blackish. I don't know if you ever seen Blackish, and she like, they yelling, whatever. But in that moment, however long it took, they loved one another, right? And so we're here. And God saw fit. We could have just not been here. So you know what, conception, which I believe is a sacred thing, is a miracle. It just didn't happen because it just wasn't right. So we are all here for a reason. We're here to show our divine expression of God. For no one or nothing is for us or against us. Right? It all simply is. So we have to be real clear that we're here for a reason. Now, my whole point of this message this morning is about our relationships with others. Last week I talked about relationships with others. Today I'm talking about relationships with ourselves. That is what's important. When we let the love that is within us go out to the God who is in all people, then we are loving God with all of our heart and with all of our soul and mind, because we are recognizing that the spirit within us is the same spirit that we meet in others. This is loving our neighbors as ourselves. Let's say that, because the interesting thing about this, we get mad at folks. I'm not even here to say that I don't get mad. I get angry, get disappointed, frustrated. In that moment that we interact with another person, sometimes we decide, oh, they the devil, they the demon. He or she has the same God that you have that made you here. So you're mad and you decided in your own judgment that they're not supposed to be here. They're not worthy of all the love. In most cases, when we have issues with other people, let me just say this real quick. They're trying to get their needs met. They are trying to meet their needs. Nobody woke up this morning saying, let me just ruin their lives, right? No, I mean, there's a need, at the core of that, there's a need that they meet, they're trying to meet. They're not saying, I'm gonna ruin his life, her life, I'm gonna hurt her today. Now, if you find yourself interacting with someone who says, yeah, I meant to do that, then there's some other stuff, some mental health stuff that's going on. But in most cases, we are trying to meet our needs. And this is by Ernest Holmes. So points of view, J. Krishnamurti says, only in relationship can you know yourself, not in abstraction, and certainly not in isolation. And this goes back to the story about the guru who was on the mountain. Everything was perfect when he was on the hill because he didn't have to bump up against anybody. He didn't talk to anybody. I've learned to control my anger. I'm controlling my anger because it's just me. What am I getting mad at? A bug? I'm gonna get mad at a rock? I'm in the mountains. I'm loving and living life in isolation. I like to use some other folks. So Ozzie Davis, wonderful man. If a relationship is based on what I am getting, then all is lost. Now, I'm not saying that some of us have reasons to be together, right? I love being with my wife and receiving the love that she gives me. I'm sure she loves the love that I give her. And folks have those types of interactions in their relationships. But I think if it's only about what you're getting and it's never about what you're giving to that person, rethink that relationship because you're not operating in fairness. Our relationship, this is Susan Taylor. Now, if you're familiar with, I think she was the editor of Essence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Susan Taylor says, our relationships are our mirrors. Our relationships are our mirrors. Have you ever met anybody that they fight with everybody? I have. Like, wow, you fight with that person, this person. They get along with everybody. You fight with them? The common denominator usually is them. It's like, you need to kind of rethink what's happening. Why are you fighting with them? Our relationships are our mirrors. They reflect where we are in consciousness. And if we are able to face the truth about ourselves, our relationships offer the lessons that lead to our greatest transformation. I always tell my wife that I don't think that I could have had this journey. I'm sure there would have been another journey, but I don't think I could have had this journey with anyone else. With her is who I believe in her support and her love has got me to this place, right? And I'm sure that she could say the same thing about me in her own journey. And that's important because we do mirror one another. And I'm sure you can each share how you mirror the others in your life. And I'm not necessarily just talking about romantic relationships. Some of us have brothers, sisters, friends. They're just other people who get us, right? They get us. Wesley Snipes, I thought this would be funny for even quoting him, right? Wesley, we know he at one point owed taxes himself, right? But I like Blade, so. The person who seeks to change another person in a relationship basically sets the stage for a great deal of conflict. Ooh, you try to change a grown man, a grown woman?
Children.
Listen, a friend of mine one time said, why'd you let her? I ain't let her do nothing. I ain't tell her. What you want me to do? Grab her and say, do this, you better do this? We talking about a grown woman, right? So if somebody, I'm not necessarily talking about Crystal, but just in general in relationships, hearing the chatter, I cannot make another person do anything. Just as, and my wife will tell you that I'm stubborn, you can't make me do, thank you. You can't make me do anything. And I'm sure that some of the brothers could say the same thing and some of the women could say the same thing.
Yeah, you stop.
All right, so spiritual authority. All right. So John 8:7. This is a smart part of that, but this kind of takes home the whole piece. So John 8:7, Jesus told those who were trying to stone a woman for adultery, he who is without sin, let him cast the first stone. Now, the interesting thing about, there's a whole story about that, and I don't want to get into too much because it go down a rabbit hole. But during this whole conversation with these men who were ready to stone this woman for adultery, Jesus got on the ground and wrote something. They never talk about, I know there's some speculation of what he wrote, but he wrote something in the sand, right? And so it's interesting because after he said this, the men one by one walked away. And because like Jesus was still writing in the sand, and he looked up and he asked the woman, were they still there? She said, no, they're all left. And then he told her to go and sin no more, right? And so what's interesting about that is it tells a story about forgiveness. Something that when we're interacting with other people, we have to do. I started out by saying I said perfect marriage, but I also think any relationship is about forgiveness. There was a friend of mine who they've been married for a long time. I think they got married right after we were in college, so they're probably close to 30 years. And I remember, I'll share this. I'll hear about it later. Krista was adjusting to the move from California, which Baltimore and California are two different climates, so she was having a hard time. And I remember talking to a good friend, one of my fraternity brothers, his wife, and she said, you know what y'all problem is? Y'all judging each other. And I was like, woo, what do you mean by that? So we started talking a little bit more. Now they're still married. Like, it's funny because they're like the old married couple. Like, some of y'all may actually know them, so I ain't gonna give too much information. But my friend is so laid back. He's West Indian. He's so laid back. He's like, man, whatever. He's the guy, when we would go out, he would show up with beer in his pocket. I'm like, dude, they sell beer. He would have beer. He said he would have beer in his pocket. He would give him a hug or whatever. We're like, what is this? He said, beer, I brought my own beer. It's cheaper. So he snuck beer into the bar. Funny to me, I thought, right? But what his wife said, wonderful woman, was pivotal, because it really is important not to judge each other, to forgive each other, to look and say, you know what, they're doing the best they can right now. They really are. And most of us, we're doing the best we can with the resources we have, or the mind state that we have. That's a lot. Because if you're basing how somebody's handling things and moving based on how you think, we all have different education, right? Some of us went to school, and schools were great. Baltimore City College. Some of us went to Polytechnic, and then that's all the other schools, right? My cousin went to my rival school. But I say that to say we all have different education, and we also have ways of receiving the education. So just be mindful of that, right? All right, I'm going to quote Ernest Holmes 2 more times. Love is kind, gentle, and understanding. It is tolerant of others and reaches back through indifference and coldness to life, to something warm, pulsating, that is at the very center of everything. We're talking about that God center that is in all of us. When we forget that, that's when we're really judging. Like, wait, they're trying to figure this out. They are a child of God just like I am. If you say that to yourself when you're angry with someone, you'd be surprised how much you see the humanness in. Like, they really are like, they're all right. They trying to figure this out too. Because the truth is, there's forgiveness that you give and there's forgiveness that you receive. It's not always the same, it's not at the same time. None of us is as perfect in expression as we ought to be. This is Ernest Holmes now, right? We love to say in this community that we're perfect, whole, and complete. You heard Martha say it. But none of us are as perfect in expressions as we ought to be. So we're all trying to figure this out, right? So the challenge to each of us is to be great enough to rise in love, in charity, and through understanding and compassion. If you've ever lost something, I think that's where we can come together. If you've ever lost a person, I think we can come together. If you've ever had a loss, let's be general. I get to teach a grief and loss class in Morgan, and most of the students always go to the loss of a parent or someone, another human being. But I say, we all lose things all the time. People steal. We lose things, jobs. There's so many things that we have in our mind, the expectation that was going to happen, and then we're disappointed. So that's loss, right? There's like, wow, I was expecting this was going to happen. That's loss. So just understand through compassion that we all go through these motions. So application. So this is where I want to go. So mirror. So we are all mirrors of one another. I think I talked a little bit about that. And so it says, our relationships with others can challenge the very foundation of our principles. People are so erratic and unpredictable. And yeah, they can be, right, at times. But the truth is, we cannot continue to put that expectation that we have for ourselves on other people. In most cases, the expectations we have for ourselves are bad. We struggle. We're like, I'm going to get up and I'm going to be here at 9 o'clock every Sunday morning. That's not going to happen. Things happen. As Jane said, her car, she didn't know that was going to happen with the car. Some of us say, okay, I'm going to have a full breakfast and then I'm going to come to service. I'll be happy if I can grab a bowl of cereal and I'm going to get a cup of coffee because the missus is going to see to that. I shared with somebody that my wife brings me a cup of coffee, and she was appalled. Like, you bring him a cup of coffee every morning? Sometimes I get a cup of coffee for her if she's moving a little slow, right? So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. So this teaching says that our relationships are a mirror of our own ideas, beliefs, and judgment. The only place from which you can interact with others looks just like you. Being angry or hurt is based on the actions or words of another, is part of the human experience. But what if it's not so much about what they did or said as to how you feel about it? Now, people are going to say things all the time that you just don't agree with. I think you see this a lot on social media. People say stuff, you're like, that's interesting. And you see people having like a fallout, people they've never met, a fallout back and forth war. And then you got the onlookers jumping out. You guys know about it. It's like, you don't even know this person. You will never see them again. Now, my son has shared it with me that stuff goes on all the time in his school. He goes to Mervo. And kids will fight over social media beef. I'm like, really? You fighting over with a stranger? Somebody came to a school to hurt him or her because of something they posted? Really? Like, go home, delete it, unfollow them. There's so many ways to like live safe. That you were looking for beef, right? And that's another thing. Sometimes people want to fight, so just be mindful of that. Let's be clear. What happened to you was not your fault. Let me say this again. What happened to you was not your fault, but what you do with it after that is your responsibility. I work with people all the time when I was doing therapy, actively doing therapy. People have traumas, right? And I talk about that a lot. We all have traumas. In most cases, the traumas that happened to us took 30 seconds, 3 minutes, whatever, not a lot of time, right? But we lived with it for years and years and years. So this message is saying, what you do with it is not, what you do with it is your responsibility. You are creative. You are the creative genius of your life. With this awareness and gentleness that you're cultivating, you get to redefine any aspect of your life at any time. Don't even bother beating yourself up for previous bad relationships or experiences. Start fresh and aim and claim them as useful fodder for recognizing the awesomeness of you. So that's a lot. You know, I like I said, I heard a lot of stories. People did some horrible things to people. It wasn't right, it wasn't fair. Oftentimes these are children. Things happened to us when we were children. And it's really about letting that go. I know it's easy to say, oh, well, Jamel, how can you say let that go? He did, she said, she did. Let it go. There's no time machine. I love to use this expression. We don't have a time machine to go back and say, stop. What we can do is in the present, right here, right now, claim your safety, the love that is you, the love that is God, the friends that are there to support you, claim them for yourself. The more you love yourself and who you are, the more that love shows up in your relationship with others. So you are now proof that love exists, and your relationships are proof that you love you. Active compassion. This has a lot to do with other people. People are always doing their best, and they are always sacred and holy. Sometimes these are hard lessons and difficult to agree with. When we apply compassion to ourselves, while we may not like what we did or said, we comprehend that part of being human. The part of being human is to make mistakes. Active compassion for others leads to a deeper understanding of this truth. I'm sure, I'm clear that me and my wife don't agree on everything, but I still love her regardless, right? I think that the Ravens are better than what's that team in San Francisco?
Whatever.
But all seriousness, I think that we got to be really clear about accepting those, whatever those things are about that person, right? Compassion does not mean that people get free reign to treat you however they want to. It does mean that you always have a full understanding of why they do what they do. Every person, everywhere, has an unknown story, has lived through their traumas, and has had tragedies. They have created ways to live and function based on their history, just like you. Now, I didn't put this quote up here, but the Dalai Lama says, the moment you develop a sense of concern for others, you realize that just like ourselves, they want happiness, they also want satisfaction. This goes back to what I said. We are trying to meet our needs. We're all trying to meet our needs. You might say, wow, why do they act like that? Somebody might be saying that about you. Why does Jamel act like that? Active compassion requires focus and intention. Your intention is to let the people in your life be themselves and to love them for who they are. Then you are gentle with the reminders to yourself. Giving space. And so I love this one because this is a man just looking down above everything, right? And from a 360-degree view, such as from the top of a high building, the world looks a lot different. Sometimes this is the perspective that we need in life and our relationships. When we are too close, things can get muddled and confusing. Loving and respecting ourselves means being clear on what works for us and what doesn't. Loving and respecting ourselves gives us the space to figure out that when we are not clear. Taking our feelings into meditation and treatment can give us that space. And you'll hear myself and Issa talk about treatment and meditation. Meditation is just being in the stillness. And there's so many ways you can meditate. And I like stillness meditation. There's also walking meditations. I have to be careful with this, but even when you're working out, just having a cadence in your breath, there's so many ways that you can meditate, right? And treatment. Treatment is what we call prayer, spiritual mind treatment. It's affirmative prayer. It's declaring. Treatment is an awesome tool because it helps you to really tap into your consciousness. If you are feeling negative, if you're feeling off-center, if you're feeling like, hey, you know what? I need to look at my view for on things. I would even challenge you after this. I'm going to put you on the spot here. Ask Issa for a treatment. Say, hey, you know what? You don't have to give him everything. Just ask him for a treatment and see how it feels afterwards. I'm just myself too, but he gives awesome treatments. Just check in with yourself and see what that feels like for you, right? This is about prayer changes things. We call it treatment prayer. It's prayer. I remember sharing with someone who was traditional in their faith, and we were talking, and it was like, what is a spiritual mind treatment? So I did one, and they were like, oh, wow, that is awesome. It feels poetic. It feels artsy. It feels... And I was helping them understand this is about changing how they see things. Because oftentimes we want God to just come in and, let me just pick this up and move this over here. Sometimes it ain't moving. It's you and how you're seeing it. That is what treatment does. We tend to take ourselves far too seriously. Often what results from taking some space is the realization that we took something personally. That the person in question was just human, and so were you. Sometimes, for whatever reason, it's time to love someone from a distance, to actually give yourself physical space and distance from the other. Now, I've done that. I've had folks where I'm like, well, let me kind of back up a little bit and not be so in their space, right? Because I have my agenda. If it's about what I think is happening and why we're bumping into each other, sometimes it's like, fall back and see what that really is. While we are indeed one energy, we as humans are individualized expressions of God. Giving ourselves space and time to figure out what is right for us is one of the healthiest and gentlest things we can do for ourselves and for others in our lives. The funny thing is, I hear the kids talk about it, and then I work with students, and they talk a lot about ghosting people. Now, ghosting is a practice where you can say, this just isn't going to work. The problem with ghosting is that you never resolve the thing, and then you get into a new relationship or whatever, and that thing is still there. Sometimes it's not that person. Sometimes it's just how you respond to things. So here's my call to action, right? Continuing to build our giant of gentleness is not exclusively independent of others. In fact, we are never alone. Being in a relationship with others provides some of the most rewarding and exhilarating experiences in life. And they can also be tedious and downright frustrating. Recognizing our oneness with each other gives us introspection and awareness of our own judgments and how they reflected in our relationships. Loving ourselves is loving the other. Loving ourselves is loving the other. Reaching for the outpouring of divine givingness is an act of compassion and allows our beloveds to be themselves. It also gives us space that we need to find balance and perspective. Now, you're not going to make anyone do anything. So that is something that we need to definitely consider and keep considering. Lastly, our relationships are sacred and holy. This gentleness is how we see those around us as well as ourselves. This gentleness is expanding and growing Practicing it keeps us alive and sends out subtle reminders to all, everywhere in the world. So keep that in mind, that it is going to be important that as we interact with others, it is important that we continue to love ourselves and let our own light shine. And from that, I am complete. Thank you.
Amen.